My name is Constance Butel. I first met Delaine Eastin in the 1970s when I was a manager at Pacific Telephone Company in San Francisco. Delaine had joined the phone company in a one-year make-it-or-break-it program called Guidelines for Management Development. So she entered as a first-level supervisor. If she excelled, she'd be promoted to second level within a year and to district manager at the completion of her second year. It was an intense program, and I was her first manager. Naturally, Delaine excelled in all aspects of management, but also in her care for people and her enduring friendships. This video is a tribute and repository of her humor, intelligence, love of her friends and of her golden state of California, and her passion for children and education. Whenever and wherever her friends and community called her, Delaine was there. As an early member of Women in Telecommunications and our 1985 trip to China, sponsored by the All China Women's Federation and the Ministry of Posts and Telecommunications, running for multiple offices, supporting other Californians, especially women, in their bid for elected offices, and so on. This video extracts moments where Delaine showed up and showed she cared for her friends, her focus on the future, how we can do better. Delaine, your voice and legacy are strong. We know you were a storyteller, and the stories you had to tell were and will remain compelling and inspiring.
I've lived all over California. I've been all over California. I love California. But I love Davis very, very much. So I want to thank all of you for being my neighbors and friends. And some of you are my neighbors from Sacramento and some of you are my neighbors from Woodland, but we're all neighbors and friends. But every one of you means absolutely the world to me. And one of the greatest quotes in my life is, "Never send to know where man's glory most begins and ends, but say my glory was I had such friends."
Yes.
So I thank you all for being my friends.
You know, when you see a turtle on a fence post, you know it didn't get there by itself. I always say that great leaders are not afraid to hire people as smarter than they are, and to encourage them to share and to work together and to be a team.
Emily Dickinson said, "My friends are my estate. Nothing could be truer for me than that." So in addition to thanking my alma mater, I want to thank each one of you who helped me carry the load of life at times when I was faint of heart.
The whole act of participation changes us. And so I'm here to tell you that I think what you're learning about how children learn is important, but it's also important that you are concerned about, involved with social justice, and that you are concerned about and involved with getting our kids engaged politically and civically. Because I will tell you, we get richer and stronger as a nation when our people really feel engaged and involved. It changes us forever. Kids are involved in powerful learning through service learning and civic engagement. I have met students who were restoring streams and rivers and protecting vernal pools in the Bay of San Francisco. I've observed students tutoring other students and peers. I've met kids nurturing school gardens and community gardens and better engaging students in terms of how to improve their food options for themselves as well, sometimes as for the needy in their community or the elderly in their community. I've seen industrial arts students engaged in building a house for doctors in a rural part of California. When I was at Mills, I administered the Center for Civic Engagement and Women's Leadership, and in that was contained the Institute for Civic Leadership, and we involved a lot of our Mills women all around the country and all around the world in getting involved in helping students. I could go on, but the important thing is that this is empowering, and we can and must do more to empower our students, because great civilizations inspire great personal achievement and great social responsibility. I really do believe that we are in a crisis time and we cannot turn away from public policy. We must stand up for doing the right thing. For the future, for the children who are not yet born, and for your own children and grandchildren. Well, our problem is that we don't have the courage, we don't have the vision, and we don't have the heart to follow through on what we know works. To all of you, I say, if I gave the strongest person in this room, well, if I gave any of you 20 pencils one at a time, you could break all 20. But the strongest person in this room cannot break those 20 pencils if they're together. So we've got to stay together. We've got to learn to support one another, and we've got to continue this act of communication and partnership between higher ed and K-12. How can we do better? Well, we bring back the voters we lost who don't feel heard. We make sure that people that disagree with us don't feel shunned. We welcome healthy debate, knowing that what is best for this beautiful state is optimism, not fear. So when I'm chair, we'll stand for what our platform says we stand for. Empowering historically marginalized communities. This will be the party of Medicare for all, clean money and campaign finance reform, housing justice, true environmental justice, including a Green New Deal. And you all who have those amazing refineries near you, you know that we do need, in fact, a lot more attention on the environment. We also don't need to worry about, yes, Black Lives Matter. We also need to worry about immigrants' rights and social justice. And yes, education and child development need to be a democratic priority. And that's, by the way, what the state constitution says should be our priority. So I'm running really to be organizer in chief. I want to open this party up and not have so much dominance by the chair, but have much more democratic process for picking people who run our party. Welcome to the Sustainable Benicia Forum. My name is Delaine Eastin, and I believe that planning for a sustainable future is common sense. But as Mark Twain said, the problem with common sense is it's not very common. Previous generations thought about sustainable strategies all the time. If they did not, they were dead. And in fact, my grandmother Eastin used to sit down at the table with her husband and some of their 13 children, and say, I've raised everything at this table except the salt and the sody. The fact is that she spent the entire spring, summer, and into fall thinking about what they were going to eat that winter. That was just in the 1900s. The fact is, the concepts associated with sustainable living are not new, they are old. They are not frivolous whims, but conservative values that we must remain committed to. We need to know our history, and we need to keep thinking about tomorrow. The state of California used to be peopled by pioneers, inventors, and long-range thinkers. We need to bring that thinking back again. The fact is, mind you, many of the big thinkers in our past were made fun of, but the truth is that Democrats, Republicans, and progressives who have led our state to greatness were always thinking about tomorrow, thinking about sustainability. Today we praise Hiram Johnson, Earl Warren, Goodwin Knight, and Pat Brown as governors who planned ahead. So it is appropriate that we gather today in our former state capital, and we do so remembering that we are standing on the shoulders of people who took amazing risks through a very tough time in our nation's history, through depressions and wars, in order that we could be here tonight. The fact is that now communities must take responsibility for planning ahead. Too often, I'm sorry to say, the government seems feckless in Sacramento. And it really is up to individual communities to band together and to think about what we can do to make this a more desirable place.
Great civilizations arise from the imagination and hard work of people who are nurtured by the societies to develop their gifts. In a word, education. Education, the place where personal and social responsibility come together for personal and social greatness, both together. In a great civilization, cities, counties, schools are institutional incubators of human potential. Our job is to create institutional incubators of human potential.
Education, quality education, goes far beyond learning the multiplication tables. Education is most certainly about learning the real work of democracy, and I sincerely hope that you will make it happen when you go back to whichever state you are from. I want to state the obvious to begin with, and that is that the global economy has fundamentally changed the importance of education. My parents' generation didn't necessarily need to give everybody a great education. I was born in 1947. In 1950, 85% of the jobs in the United States economy were for unskilled laborers. Not skilled laborers like the machinists, mechanics, and carpenters I was talking about. Unskilled laborers. The truth is, you didn't necessarily need the kind of education that you absolutely need today in order to succeed in the global economy. We are in a multipolar world with very serious countries investing deeply and heavily in the preschool for all, in the equivalent of our K-12 system for all, and in systems of post-secondary education, including higher ed. The Chinese have something like 360 new colleges under construction this afternoon. I was privileged to go to France as a guest of the French-American Foundation after we had a preschool task force. And I was invited, and Karen Hill Scott, who some of you know, a marvelous woman from Los Angeles, who's one of the great national leaders in preschool, she and I were part of this American contingent to go look at the preschools in France. I will tell you that at the preschools in France, it's an 8-hour program, goes from 8 to 4. The municipality is responsible for the buildings, but the federal national government pays for the teacher's salary. Those teachers are in marvelous settings all day long, and yes, class sizes are actually a little bigger than I thought they would be, but because it's an 8-hour program, the children have a 2-hour lunch period in there. At lunch, the meal is served on real china plates with real glassware and real silverware. And we ate what the kids ate for lunch. One day it was roast lamb with radicchio salad. Another day it was an amazing salad and marvelous breads. And yet another day we had one of the best shepherd's pies I've ever eaten in my life was salad. The only difference was in the teacher's lounge they served red wine. And this preschool for all, the steepest learning curve in the history of a child's life is from 0 to 5. There are connections that are being made in the brain called synapses, and you can only make them from 0 to 5. You can't come back retrospectively and retroactively put them in where they need to be. Those connections can only be made in those early years in the school. And that one you save because that teacher was there who was a mentor to that child. Because the research on dysfunctionality in this country shows that over 70% of the kids in dysfunctional families grow up to be functional adults. They have two things in common: a mentor other than a parent, most commonly a teacher, and more education than their parents got. This is the solution to social ill and lots of other things. And I say to you, if you did not come from a dysfunctional family, I've lived long enough to know you either married somebody from a dysfunctional family, or your best friend was from a dysfunctional family. Me, I'm a triple dipper. And we certainly can't afford a Cadillac prison system and jalopy schools. And I have to tell you all, I'm a machinist's daughter. My mom's a dress clerk, right? So I get to go to the wonderful schools of California. And it changed my life forever, and I want that for every kid. But guess what? We're not doing that right now. We were 5th of the 50 states when I graduated from high school. California was tied with New York. Today, New York spends more than twice as much per child as California. You want to know how bad that is? We're living in the most expensive state in the Union, with the largest number and percentage of poor children and the largest number and percentage of English learners. We should be in the top 10, not the bottom 10. I'll also say to all of you, and I want to talk a little bit about higher education, because most people don't realize that when you were all growing up, 18% of the state budget went to higher ed. 3% went to prisons. Higher ed is down below 12%. Prisons are above 9%. You are 41st in per pupil spending and number 1 in per prisoner expenditure. How many of you think that's a good plan? I haven't met a single Californian. In fact, I had a couple of correctional officers come up to me and say, I'm a correctional officer. I don't think it's a good idea. So you want to know the best crime prevention program? It's called education. You want to know the best economic development program? It's called education. You know, the Silicon Valley wasn't born here because of a confluence of rivers. You've been down there. You've been to Santa Clara. There's no Tigris. There's no Euphrates. It was a confluence of educational opportunities that created the Silicon Valley. And we can and should be doing it again. But guess what happened? Since 1985, we built one UC campus. 3 CSUs, 9 campuses of the community college. Do the math with me. Remember, there's 107 community colleges. There's, 23 CSUs. There are 10 UCs. Total of 13 campuses since 1985. In that same period of time, congratulations, we built 23 prisons.
But everybody here cares about education. And I'm not ashamed to say to the people in this room, it is my #1 priority. It is the most important thing the state does. It is in the state constitution that that's supposed to be our first priority. But I want the whole panoply. I want child development. There's a bunch of families out there that are struggling. There are 300,000 families on waiting lists to get child development. 300,000. In 2007, when the recession hit, child development was only 3% of the state budget, but it took 20% of the cuts. And so they've never restored that money. K-12, we used to be 5th of the 50 states. A lot of us in this room grew up in a state where we were tied with New York in per pupil spending. Tonight, we're 41st. But I'm horrified to tell you we're #1 in per prisoner expenditure in the nation. But whether it's UC Davis or the community college or the state university system, all education, career and technical education, every piece of education is vital to us. I once debated Milton Friedman. Some of you have heard this story, and the voucher was on the ballot, and this dad got up in the Silicon Valley auditorium and he said, frankly, I have 3 kids of my own, and I can't worry about other people's children. I'm just worried about my children. I want a voucher so my children can go to a good private school. I said, oh, you don't fly? He says, well, I fly all the time. I said, well, next time you're in an airplane, remember somebody else's child's the pilot. Somebody else's child machined the parts in that wing assembly when it lifts up so beautifully and you land safely. And somebody else's child's the air traffic control tower, seeing you and your family safely home. This country runs on other people's children.
Well, has to become our mantra. Whether you're a parent, school board member, whether you're a teacher, or whether you're an aunt or an uncle, a grandparent, it really doesn't matter. The most important thing we can do is to teach our children well.
Moving on to education. California's high school graduation rate hovers around 83%, which sounds good, but it is not. It falls well below the national average. What would you do to boost that percentage above 83%?
Well, first let me say that of course we have the research. We have the finest research institutions in the world. We know the steepest curve of learning is 0 to 5. Then why is preschool more available in Georgia and Oklahoma than it is in California? We need to invest in preschool. We need to make kindergarten mandatory and full day. We need to make sure that we reinvest in the kids' education. Ladies and gentlemen, you're living in the most expensive state in the union, but you are 41st in per pupil spending. What does that translate? Oh, you have the highest number and percentage of poor kids, highest number and percentage of English learners. You should be in the top 10, not the bottom 10. But guess what? You're #1 in per prisoner expenditure. That's a disgrace. Budgets are statements of values, and to look at our budget, you'd think prisons were more important than education. Frankly, the best way to avoid incarceration is to educate the kids. And by the way, that includes higher education. It's a disgrace that we have these high fees. We need to bring college tuition free again in the state of California. The most important job in America is to be a teacher. Many of us on this platform are here because we had some great teachers. And I will say, you shouldn't be shocked that there's a teacher shortage. My motto is the floggings will continue until morale improves. We need to lift up education. We need to treat it like it's the most important work we have to do as a democracy, because it is. It's about economic development. It's also about civic engagement. It's about making sure that our kids have civic responsibility at their core, as well as understanding how STEM works. And all of us together need to fight for the future by fighting for the children. But teachers should be treated with greater respect.
Your time is expired. Hold on. All right.
I'll leave you with this thought. I was mad at Lyndon Johnson for a lot of years because of the Vietnam War. I have respect for him because of the civil rights movement, so I was torn. But when I went to his ranch outside of Austin, my oldest friend lives there now, I went to the ranch and they moved the one-room schoolhouse that he went to as a child. On the tour guide said, you know, Lyndon's mother came in with Lyndon by the hand and begged the teacher to let him start school at age 4 because he could already read. And the teacher said, you can read, huh? Show me.
She said, well, I didn't bring a book. She says, I've got books. Went over and got a book Lyndon had never seen, and she opened it, and he sat down and he read it. And the teacher said he can start school. And Lyndon Johnson said he always felt that starting school at age 4 gave him a head start on his education. That's why it's called Head Start. He started it. I say to each and every one of you, you now have a wonderful head start because you have your doctorates or you're working on your doctorates. It is extremely important that this not just be a credential you hang on the wall, but it's a credential you carry in your heart, that you fight for children and their education. You fight for the children at the margins. I taught at the Youth Authority one semester when I was down in Santa Barbara, and I finished school. I was teaching at Ventura College, and they asked me to teach at the Youth Authority, and I had supposed to have a maximum of 25 incarcerated youth. I had 53. They said, well, we could send 28 of them back to their cells. I said, no, I'll take them, but I need 28 more textbooks. Oh, I don't think we can get them by the end of the semester. So I went down to the UC Santa Barbara bookstore, and I bought 28 copies of the textbook, and I brought it back, and the guy got mad at me. I didn't authorize that. If they didn't pay me back, it would cost me more than I got paid to teach the class. So, but the fact is that I got to know those students because they were supposed to do a research project. They were getting college credit. I got to know them, and their stories were heartbreaking. You know some of these stories. You've heard them. I met a young girl whose mother addicted her to heroin when she was 13 and put her in a stable. The fact is, she shouldn't have been in jail, nor should the young man whose parents just told him to run into a market. Here's $5, go buy a pound of hamburger. He ran into the market and came out, and they were gone. He's up in the mountains. These children are children, and we have to do a better job of finding scaffolding for them, and it can't just be prisons. It has to be compassionate and careful, conceived. So I say, when we think about what we're doing, we ought to say, if a bunch of people coming out of a depression and a war could have had such a vision and could have made us the envy of the world, who then copied us and looked at how we were doing, surely to God we can get our memories back. We can make this investment in our kids, and it should be in all levels of education, from preschool to graduate school, public and private, especially higher ed, but also preschool and child development. These little children need to get a good start, a head start, something that'll really put us ahead and help our country. So I say to all of you tonight, thank you for being educators. Thank you for your commitment to the improvement of our children's lives. It's the most important job in America. Thank you.
It is, in fact, important that we change the conversation about politics in this state and in our nation.
Yes.
It has to be less about money and more about posterity.
Yes.
Remember, posterity.
Yes.
It's the only interest group important enough to be named in the preamble to the Constitution of the United States. Secure these blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. So it's time for us to insist that from this day forward, the people we represent, and I really and truly do believe that this is important, and I've got some wonderful electeds here, former electeds here. I will just say, spouses of electeds here. I will just say to each and every one of you, we have got to stop making decisions about today and start making decisions for tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, I always say if you really get down in the mouth, you know, you need to go and look in the eyes of a child. I used to think I saw hope there, but instead I now realize hope is something you do with your fingers crossed. When you look in the eyes of a child, what you see is optimism. And so indeed, we have to have optimism about where we're going and who we are and what we're going to do in the future. De Anza College and Kenyatta College and at their satellite campuses teaching, and I got appointed to the Planning Commission because I was going to write the definitive textbook on California state and local government. And somehow I got the bug and wound up being somebody's campaign manager who was running for election and later ran myself. So that's how I came to go to the private sector, because I wanted to be Prop 13 had passed. I was up for a full-time job, and I got passed over because they froze all new hires. And so I went to the private sector. And I will say I'm glad I did. I learned a lot. So I learned things like long-range planning at the company that we worked for. So imagine my surprise when I got to the legislature, having served 2 terms in the city council, and I asked to see the long-range plans. You know, the city was required to have a long-range plan, and the County was required to have a long-range plan, so I asked to see the long-range plans. Finally, I got to Water Parks and Wildlife, and the consultant said, yeah, we have a long-range plan. It was done under Governor Brown, Pat Brown, 1957. It is still the most recent water plan. You want to know why there's an $800 million problem at Oroville? Maybe it has something to do with the fact we're not doing any water planning. And oh, by the way, the Higher Ed Master Plan, that was done in 1960 under Pat Brown. You get the picture?
What is our message to the future? I want it to be great education, clean water, a wonderful environment, wonderful future. Planning as well. We got to do some long-range planning. You know, the Oroville Dam thing should be a wake-up call for everybody.
Right.
You can't say we don't have a water plan. We do. Done under Governor Brown, Pat Brown, 1957. So we got to get somebody nimble enough to look down the road. But because many of the people here today worked for me, I can say I am not afraid to hire people smarter than me to work for me, and that's been part of my success.
And he said, do we really have 5 state agencies? And his staff, to her credit, said, don't go there, Governor. Delaine tried to eliminate 4 of them, and you wouldn't let her. So in the end, the governor became very cooperative, and of course he took full credit for class size reduction. But always remember that old line, if we don't care who gets credit, there's no end to what we can accomplish.
What we need right now are not people looking to the state or looking to Washington, D.C. for solutions. We need committed community members to join together, whether they are schools or cities or nonprofits or religious organizations. We need everybody to get together around and behind our children. But at the end of the day, if you have great research and you lack the vision and the courage and the heart to stand up for the children, the research isn't going to do you a lot of good. Neil Postman said, children are a message we send to a time we will never see. But it is Neil Postman who said, children are living messages we send to a time we will never see. What is our message to the future? I'm sure every person on this patio has heard my favorite quote, which is Neil Postman, who said, children are living messages we send to a time we'll never see. I say to you, that is truly what we all need to be thinking about. I like to remind people what Neil Postman said. Children are living messages we send to a time we will never see. The most important thing we do in this state and in our nation is to educate our children. That is the most important work of a generation for the next generation. I'll give you a quote that many of you have heard me say before because it's my favorite. Neil Postman said, children are a living message we send to a time we will never see. What is our message to the future? What is our message? I know my parents' generation message to us was that anything is possible. God, but they had courage and vision and heart. I hope you go forward from here with those qualities as well as with a good dose of optimism. Thank you very much.
To be honest, if someone had shown me a list of the attendees and asked what the occasion was, I might have thought it was my funeral. But this is so much better than a funeral. To paraphrase Monty Python, she's alive! And indeed, I have never felt more alive, more grateful, more humble than I do at this moment. If I leave you with one last thought from me, it is thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for opening doors and yes, giving me a shoulder to cry on, holding my hand and lifting me up, yes, for writing me letters of reference or even writing checks for my campaign, making me laugh so hard that I snorted in an unladylike fashion. You walked 3 6 and provided Kleenex. You helped me find the right clothes to wear and helped improve my appearance. Sometimes taking me to lunch or dropping me a line or making sure that my house and home were supported when I was traveling. I am forever grateful. Again, my thanks to my alma mater for what is for me the highest honor I have ever dared to dream. In the words of E. Cummings, I thank you, God, for most this amazing day, for the leaping greenly spirits of trees and a blue true dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. I who have died am alive again today, and this is the sun's birthday. This is the birthday of life and of love and wings and of the gay, great, happening, illimitable earth. I am glad that I have lived to see this day and night. And all of you, thank you, and go Ags.
Preschool back into style. Delaine, you made the civil servants all smile. Delaine, your mind is comprehensive, there's substance in your manner and your speech. You may be from San Carlos, but Davis never had a sweeter peach. You want to educate our whole state.